that we wanted to have happen. Part of the problem was two areas. One was no one really understood that they were going to cut down hundreds and hundreds of trees in this natural area. And number two, no one really gave them any checks and balances on the historic Kenema Cemetery Road, which they opted to use as a logging road to go in and out, and in the end graded it, put 3/4 inch minus on a historically important road, which was originally a native path, and then taken over by the early settlers. It was the extension of the wagon road out of Oregon City. It came up basically 7th Singer Hill and then circled around the rock outcroppings, went through Kenema, and then dropped back down and became part of what now people call the Territorial Road. But it was the way around the rock outcropping through Kenema. Historically, hundreds of thousands of natives populated in season Kenema area. So they came in and out. So this road through there was of very great importance. We were very concerned and very upset that that Metro decided to do what they did without any checks and balances, without really evaluating the historical criteria's importance, the environmental criteria's importance that we felt were there, and them embarking off on their plan, which was just to restore in their vision a plain, this field that they would like to see happen, of white oaks and madrone, and they want to do this for birds, for trees, and for restorational purpose. They see that a lot of the Douglas firs that have come down into this area are crowding out the natural canopy of the very important white oak. And there is good reason to believe that what they're saying about the white oak and how it crowds it out is true. But you have all of these factors coming along. So now they've come back and said, now that everything's kind of settled down, we'd like to come back in one more time because we've acquired a lot more property along the Kenema Bluff. They go all the way now down, well, it's 176 total acres now, something like that. So they've got fire protection needs along the bluff, and we've had in the Kenema area along the bluff, because of vagrants and campings and stuff like this, we've had 10 really serious fires. Over 10 years, we've had, I think, 3 serious fires. One which nearly came close to crowning, lit by vagrants, kids shooting off firecrackers and things like this, going back into their campfires. Well, this one nearly crowned and gone all the way up to South End Road, clear up over the top. And they brought in, I think they had 24, 25 fire apparatuses in there as they were trying to suppress it, and they were fortunately were able to. But this just shows you how tender, how this thing, serious the whole thing is. So taking a look at it really is something we would like to see the Natural Resources Committee to take a look at. Even-handed, level, evaluating all the criteria, listening to Metro and everything that they have to say, listening to the neighborhood and to all of the vested interests and people around, and really trying to come up with an intelligent, independent analysis that is in the best interest of Oregon City, the environment, and the historical aspects of Kenema. So they want to go in. The new plan is to log off all fir trees below the cemetery road, between the cemetery road virtually and the river, and then a bunch of them above the cemetery road into an area where there are some natural ponds In fact, there was once historically with early settlers dammed it up back there and created a waterway. There's kind of a little aqueduct pipe that's into the ground up there that feeds water down. And those were kind of plains area farmers that tried to farm right on this kind of meadow area, close to where this new Kanema, well, it's not new, but the redone Kanema Children's Park. So that is an issue of high importance that I would like to talk about, and hope that you guys could take a serious look at, because it's really it's one that just needs pragmatic thinking. Serious pragmatic thinking about what it is, and your opinion, it would be nice. Number two, I'm concerned on another issue that is not Kanema, and that issue is the rock outfall or outcropping that's at the mouth of the Clackamas Cove. The amount of rock there at the mouth of the Clackamas Cove is built up even greater than it's been in the past.
Yeah, are you talking about the gravel bar?
The gravel bar.
Okay, thank you.
And with the advent of, if in fact it happens, that Lake Oswego and Tigard start slurping out more water out of the Clackamas River, and we get into low water times, and with as much gravel as we have seems to be accumulating at this one spot, being able to maintain a healthy water pond in Clackamas Cove will be really difficult. Maintaining some degree of water quality if the rock bar virtually closes it off, and we can't get a natural flushing, or we can't have natural water health. This could be a stagnant pond that could really create a hazard to our community. I'd like to see us take a look at it. And one of the issues there is maybe if Lake Oswego continues in this approach, and is to say, hey, if fish can't go up and down the river because the water levels start to drop below create serious problems, maybe they have a responsibility to help dredge out some of this in order to have make it a healthy environment for fish and for the pond itself. So there's a lot of issues that could be thought through, and how you guys think it through, that's your job. I just think that what I see there right now is becoming a hazard, creating problems that put into jeopardy water health within the Clackamas Cove, and I would hope that somebody would take a look at it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Paul. And if the committee pleases, you can add this as an agenda item for discussion in the future. Or
would it be appropriate to ask questions at this time?
Yeah, we'll jot them down, and then we may need some time to respond. But yeah, go ahead.
Bob Roth, I have a little bit of experience actually canoeing over at Clackamas Cove and things, and from your perspective, what are the water quality challenges and the sources of the water quality problems at Clackamas Cove right now? You mentioned something about becoming a stagnant pond, but what kind of...
Well, obviously, I also sit on the Urban Renewal Commission, and I got a report that came to the Urban Renewal Commission from DEQ talking about the leaching of water, of problems that come from the garbage dumps and come into there. And so if we don't get adequate flushing and kind of reinvigorating the water, that can add to the problem. So I've seen it over the years where it kind of gets really mossy and green, late summer, and you can start to say, the water health now is really marginal. Well, with the building up of more rock, and if we have less water flow flowing in and flushing it out in the best way, then the leaching of water that's coming in from the garbage dump could even make it worse. So it's just kind of like we're starting to get some factors that could make it into make the dynamics of this thing worse than it is right now.
I have a question of Paul regarding Metro's intent to remove these trees. How imminent is this? Is there time to give comment? Is there an open comment period from others? I mean,
Yes, there is. They wanted to try to get at it this fall. We asked that they stop it until we could have a more of a public process on it. They are going to enter into this thing. We've got a great, very, very nice Metro biologist that is responsible for this Kenema property. And I think that he's good. So that makes him very persuasive, even if in some cases he's carrying the mail of what Metro wants. And it maybe what Metro wants is not necessarily what Oregon City wants or what is best for this area. A little historical history. My father-in-law, when he first got out of Oregon State College with a master's degree in forestry, one of his first jobs was cruising this whole Kenema Bluff because it was logged many times. So it was logged for Douglas firs, and it was a major logging area. So when I laugh when they start talking about, well, these trees weren't there. Well, they were there enough that they created major logging roads into the area that Metro plans to use, and so these trees, a lot of these trees are not interlopers. They're just coming in. They've been there for a long time, at least since the 1920s and 30s.
Paul, do you know the biologist's name?
Brian
something, yeah.
Yeah, Brian, I will I'll email it to you, but he's heads and shoulders better than they've ever had before. Really a nice guy.
I spoke to him once about 2 months ago, and he seemed very open.
Yes.
Potentially, we could invite him for a presentation too.
Yeah, he would come here and put on a presentation, try to explain. But really, would be nice also to invite you guys when it's right, the events where we'd love to. The neighborhood would like to get you out and show you the turf. We can, so you can see it yourself. You can make your own evaluations of what it is, and you can think it out. I get nervous when I will go in with any group on any time. It's just that everybody has there's so many special interests that have their agendas. I just would like to say that this is where my hope is that you guys approach this as a non-agenda driven. This is what is right. Just period. So I want to be very careful not to taint the water. I don't want anybody else to taint the water. I want you guys to arrive at your own conclusions based upon your own pragmatic thinking.
It sounds really nice that we'll be able to talk with the biologists. I really like that sound of that idea.
Yeah.
Get more information and different
absolutely.
type of insight.
Yeah, it sounds as if this is definitely something for the NRC if you decide to put this on your future agenda item.
Pete,
You
I
can do
have
that?
a question. The property that Metro's purchased, is all that property within the urban growth boundary for Oregon City?
A lot of it, not all of it.
But most of this area that they want to log is. Most, I don't know that any of it that they want to log is not.
Yeah, I mean, if we do a presentation, we can certainly look at which parcels are and which parcels aren't and that sort of thing.
So this is, so most of Kenema, the urban growth boundary goes clear past the cemetery. And then cuts up kind of, basically, the back of the cemetery is kind of the back of the urban, and then it goes down to Highway 99 and then juts all the way down Highway 99 to where that, past the bowl where the boats are and all that, in that motel and stuff, crummy stuff. So that's all, there's a little basin there, that's all in the urban growth boundary. And then everything about, there's 26 acres back in there that's all in the urban growth boundary of undeveloped land. And I've kind of done an assessment of back it, but then they bought everything virtually up the hill from the urban growth boundary virtually up to the crest of the hill, and have an option where they could actually buy more. So this is, they've determined that they would like to try to get all of this land, if they can, all the way down to one of those, what's the islands, Jerry, on the...
Little Rock and Rock Island.
Yeah, they'd like to try to get down into that area, so that's kind of down the line, and so this is listed on the Metro Land deal as a priority acquisition area
For open space.
for natural area open space.
Yeah. All right. Great. I think if we have any more questions about this, we should really
Yeah,
put it
I
on.
just wanted to make a couple of comments on it. The main cause of the water quality problems that could occur is the fact that the mouth is naturally shutting off. And the Fish and Game Department for Oregon has issues with taking that gravel bar out because it's a natural formation that encourages certain natural things. But at the same time, getting poor water quality is something that's concerning DEQ, obviously, and other people. So we have two government agencies that might have to butt heads here. Maybe we should encourage that. And the logging is interesting. It is true that Madrona, especially oak, and also Madrona are shade intolerant, and indeed oaks can actually shade them out, especially, or not oaks, but firs can actually shade them out. And firs aren't all that shade tolerant, but they're much more than oak and Madrona. And the tolerant tree wins is what the foresters say. In other words, the ones that are shade tolerant are the ones that will be there at the end.
Yeah.
Because they can put up with forest conditions, whereas Douglas fir and those others all require fairly open conditions to get started.
Wherever they have found some white oaks that back into there, when they did they did a very good survey. They've said, okay, this they found a couple real nice. I've gone back into this with Brian, and we've looked around, and they said, okay, here's a nice one, Paul. See, this is the reason why we need to save that. And it's kind of, they take so damn long to get to the quality and the size of this specimen tree. So it's kind of like it's a tree that maybe should be identified as a, what do you call it, a heritage tree?
Yeah.
And so there are some back there. That and so all of a sudden you say, ooh, this may be a heritage tree nominee. And if it's true, then maybe we should be doing creative work around it to ensure that it lives. You know, so this is not like a simple task that I'm hoping you guys bite the apple with.
One of the arguments that led to this sort of action is that it's one of the habitat types in the Willamette Valley that there's the least left of.
Right.
And that's why they want to encourage oaks. And you know, maybe in this case they've taken it to extremes, but basically they're trying it in a lot of parks.
Yeah,
all over the whole area.
And this is just
the whole valley.
and it you know, some of it may be really justified, or maybe it, you know, but it's kind of like what level, where do you draw lines, how can you be smart, how do we do check, and how do we maintain something that's very, very historic. This historic cemetery, Kanema Cemetery, is 1864, and it has the marker for Sam Barlow, the Barlow Trail, his wife, in it. And so it's one of those places that goes back. It virtually has as much equal, it predates our big cemetery, and so this is an important place in the road. This historic cemetery road is not one to be trifled with because of it's a native road trail. So that pulls in Native Antiquity Act implications. And so when they went off and did what they did to it initially, that was a no-no. And no one provided any checks and balances on them, and we called them on it. But now they want to get going again. How do they do it? Should they use helicopter methods if they want to pull some of the trees out? How do they do it? And then you get into this fire trail. How do you get apparatus in and out and do some of the things that are necessary just to maintain adequate fire protection? It's a lot of issues. Need some good thinking.
Can I clarify one question? Just
I think we need to postpone these questions and some of the content of this discussion for future agenda items and move on to some of our items.
I have something I wanted to bring to the attention of the group, and I was wanting to go out there and sit out there if that's okay, so I could see the group. And my intention was to tell them about the Heritage Waters Task Force. It'll take me 3 minutes.
Oh, well, we do that at number 6, Jerry. Staff communications. At the end of the meeting, when we're talking, we can share all of that information.
Okay.
Yeah, but in deference to some of the items that we do have on the agenda, let's move forward.
All right.
Yeah. So thanks, Paul, and we'll be sure to talk about this and bring it up in future. Next up, we have a presentation from Laura Torway, sorry, on the Transportation System Plan update. Thanks, Laura. Take it away. Just so you guys know, you can flip between your agenda screen and what's on the screen behind you by flipping that toggle switch on the left side of your desks. So there's a little silver switch, and if you flip it up,
This little button right here.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
this one.
yeah. So if you flip that over to the left, it'll bring up the.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
I appreciate it.
So that way you don't have to crane your necks.
That's nice. Thank you. Very nice.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Again, my name is Laura Turway. I'm with the planning department here at the city. I am working on our transportation system plan update. Excuse me.
Laura, is that mic on?
Yes.
Thanks.
This is a copy of our current transportation system plan, or TSP. You can see kind of a large, robust document. We adopted this in 2001, and so now it's time to update it. The TSP essentially looks at how people get around the city, whether it's walking, biking, transit, freight, just how things move around and how we can move around the city easier. So we want to reevaluate our transportation system in Oregon City and make sure that we have an equitable, balanced system that better meets our needs in the future. So what we're doing is we're starting over a year-long process, which is going to contain a lot of public involvement. And I'll get to why I'm telling you this presentation at the end. We want to know from the citizens, from everyone who lives, works, anyone who has anything to do with Oregon City, how we can better the city. Can they get to a grocery store or get a gallon of milk in an appropriate distance? Is there a place where you're walking and you can see the other side of a trail, they just don't meet up? Do we want to look at how we design our roads? Maybe we want to implement more green design standards, maybe narrow up the streets, or talk about different ideas with street trees or different things like that. Do we want to add more bus stops or change our bus routes? Just anything you can think of that has to deal with moving around in the city. How can we make it easier for the citizens of Oregon City and those who live and work here to get around? On the screen, you'll see a couple more examples of improvements as well. So I'm sure all of us sitting here could think of at least a couple intersections that have poor sight or places where you think just one improvement will make things a little bit better. So, the city was awarded a grant from ODOT. It was for $214,900, and the city threw in an extra $30,000 to update this document. This process is a very inclusive process. We are forming 2 committees, a technical advisory team and a stakeholder advisory team, to work through all of our issues. We have an extensive public outreach campaign, which is here. We'll be sending notices to everyone within our urban growth boundary. We want to make sure we include those people outside city limits as well. We'll be sending things in your water bill. We'll be posting signs throughout the city. Just an aggressive campaign to ask people ways in which we can make the city better. We want to make sure that we get different groups represented so that we can kind of fill in all those gaps to make the best transportation system that we can. So with our project team, our lead consultant is DKS Associates, an engineering firm in town, and you can see all of their sub-consultants on that listed on the screen as well. Some examples of our technical advisory team include ODOT, Metro, City of Westland, Gladstone, Public Works Departments, DLCD, Fire District, TriMet, Housing Authority, OC Garbage. We want to make sure if we change our street design, they can still get their garbage trucks through. Bicycle Transportation Alliance, Willamette Pedestrian Coalition, different trucking associations. So that will be our technical committee to look at if we have different designs, technically, do they meet all of their standards? Then we have our stakeholder committee that includes CIC, Historic Review Board, Planning Commission, and you. So that's why I am here. I'm trying to recruit 2 of you to join our team, or more if you want. If you all want to join, we have open positions for everyone, but 2 people to represent the NRC. We also have business, Craig Danielson, Icon, different people will be represented in that stakeholder committee as well. So you probably want to know what our process is for updating the TSP. We are taking this big document and breaking it down to 12 manageable segments. So we're starting with 1 is what policies do we have and what are our framework? What are our guidelines? Metro and our government has adopted new standards on connectivity, things like that. So what are those standards? And then as we move throughout the process, that will include what are our opportunities for improvement or future projects, things like that. We'll create a list. What are our needs? We'll come up with solutions, and then we'll rank those projects and figure out what we can have funding for. So these are the 12 manageable segments. They'll each be broken down into a separate memorandum. So all of these memorandums are going to be posted to the website after they're complete, so the public can follow along in our process. Once they're posted to the website, we will have our Transportation Advisory Committee at the city review all of the memorandums first. They're just going to do a general overview first to make sure there's nothing that we've missed or any large problems. Then after that, we'll send them out to our technical committee and our stakeholder committee. The public, again, can comment this whole time online. So I'll show you our website in a minute, but we post all of our memorandums on the website, and then the public is welcome to upload documents to the website, post their comments on the website. There's blog format, so you can blog about any issues you have. Once those 12 tech memos are reviewed extensively, then we'll put them together in a document like this, and we'll go through a legislative review process, which requires Planning Commission and City Commission review. So, for the NRC, again, we're looking for 1 primary member to sit on our stakeholder advisory team and 1 alternate. If you guys all would like to be on our part of our team, we have open positions, and we can accommodate you for that. So your obligations include reading 12 tech memos, uploading your comments, so it's done at your own pace, at home. There are deadlines, but you can kind of follow along at your own pace. And there'll be 4 meetings that'll be held over a span of a year. Those meetings are limited to 2 hours, so it'll just be kind of where we touch base with each other at those 4 meetings.
What time of day will the meetings be?
You will be sitting on our stakeholder advisory committee, so the meetings will be after 5. Our technical committee, since they include a lot of different agencies and things like that, will be before 5. So it'll probably be, 6 to 8 or 5:30 to 7:30 or something like that. So we can talk about volunteers in a second. Let me show you our website first. So this is our website. It is octransportationplan.org. We're really excited about our website. I think we did a pretty good job about getting as much information as possible. This is our homepage. I'll go through all of the items you can click on. It'll kind of walk you through the process. Here's about with our project objectives, our process, and it gives you a summary of each of our technical memorandums. One's a bit of a tongue twister. And information about the project, when we're going to complete, and things like that. Our draft document. We already have a couple of the memorandums done. So they're posted here online. So this is our memorandum. With each memorandum, we have a summary. So we want to make sure that if you quickly read the document, you at least read these points, or maybe they're areas of contention or areas we want you to pay special attention to, or just a general summary of the document as well. So we have 3 of them already up here. On this page, you can post comments in a blog form, or you can print the document, write your comments on the document, and upload your edits on this page as well. We have news. We have a question of the month. For December, it was, is there a place you have difficult time getting to, so people can start to tell us their transportation-related issues. On our Get Involved page, you can see that we've already had a lot of comments already. So all these people are comments, and then you can comment on other people's comments if you kind of want to start a discussion or a sub-blog. So you can always post new comments at the end of the page. You do have to register your name, but that's about it. You can upload photos to the website if you think there's a place that you've been. There's a great design of some street or maybe some street tree system or a flexible sidewalk or something like that. That worked well. You can upload that. Same with the documents. But this is what we're the most proud of, is our interactive comment map. So this is where people have specifically said, right here at this intersection, you can zoom into, someone thinks a stop sign should be removed. And you can thumbs up or thumbs down if you agree or disagree, and it has their whole comment there as well. So you can see when you read these comments, they range from a lot of issues. So some are more related to natural resources and some are less. One of them is on signal timing, which we can take care of outside of our TSP process. But this project is really nice because it's an avenue to vet all your transportation-related concerns, and we can deal with it in the TSP, or, for easy ones, we can just send it to Signal Timing, Clackamas County, get it taken care of. So, again, we're looking for participation from NRC just because we want as wide of a range of experience as possible. We want to make sure that we pay special attention to be good stewards of our natural resources, and we want your input on different designs of things or creative solutions throughout the process as well. So I could tell you guys all would like to raise your hand and join this group.
We may have some questions first.
Please.
I guess I had two.
Yeah.
One of the things I've seen a lot on transportation planning is a recognition of the health benefits of encouraging pedestrians and bicycles, and I didn't know if, like, the health department, or you have specific health professional representatives on any of the stakeholder groups.
The hospital's on it, but nothing, no specific health or group. I can always take your suggestion and try and see what we have around here, and we can outreach to them if they like to join. I mean, anyone at all who wants to join. These committees are getting pretty well formed. They're almost ready to go. We just need a couple more seats filled. But if anyone wants to join throughout this process, they can, or they can just go to our website and comment. We do have, in a couple of the first tech memos, text specifically talking about the benefits of walking and biking and things like that. So we're going to be looking at a wide range of things between design itself, should we narrow streets when they're near a stream, what takes precedence, different issues as well.
And the second point is, what's the interface of any between this plan's development and kind of recognition of the impact of climate change in transportation systems?
There is discussion about climate change and those things. The whole intent of our project, a lot of our major goals are related to reducing vehicle miles traveled and to really provide a better opportunity for alternative modes of transportation or walking, biking. So the one in 2001 was good, but we want to kind of kick it up a notch when it comes to pedestrian and bicycle and really look at the city and how we can make it easier to get around. And I think avenues like this website help, where we can really ask people who live here or work here or walk a certain route every day, those little things that could actually make the difference between them walking that trail or not. Maybe it's about, maybe if it snows, if we have snow removal on those trails or something like that.
We also have some vehicle charging stations, but I guess the plan would be looking at installation of others as well, potentially, or good locations for it.
Potentially, yeah.
For electric charge and hybrids.
Yeah, we have the one down on Main, 14th and Main. The city-owned one, and then the county's got some couple. And actually, as a side note, we've been working with different groups to get more around the city, both public and private, for charging stations.
Oh, there's 3 at Danielson's.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a Danielson's?
Safely.
At Danielson's, right at the front of their administrative office.
That's right, yeah.
So, our comments are going to be a wide range. We just want to make sure that we put our natural resource lens on this project to make sure we're doing the best we can to make it as friendly as possible, and especially the different modes of transportation, and to try and lessen vehicle miles traveled. Maybe we could look at zoning, or where are people going, how are they getting there, and how can we make that shorter.
So,
I have a question. The plan, you told us the total cost of what, 30,000 plus 214. Is this to complete a document that will be then integrated into the comp plan, or what is this?
Yep. It will be replacing our existing TSP,
Okay.
and then we'll adopt it through a legislative process, and it will get adopted as the ancillary document to the comprehensive plan.
Okay. So is the comp plan update process underway now that this has to be done, or is this just a timely thing you wanted to do?
We're doing this now because we have different state and different regulations that we need to comply with. For example, connectivity, different things we are out of compliance with, and we need to become into compliance with different regional documents, RTP, different things. So we have the money now, and we need compliance now, and we have the staff ability to do it. So hopefully it'll be a really good project. We have a lot of people on board. We've been to already maybe 6 or 7 public meetings. We'll We'll go to a few more. We'll have at least 3 open houses. We'll post things on Willamette Falls TV. We'll have extensive public outreach. So hopefully we'll get a good product. The more we put into it, the more we'll get out of it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add some tidbits?
Well, we're not really there anymore, Paul, but thanks, maybe, go ahead. Sure. Keep it brief.
Quickly, one of the important parts is that this document then creates the parameters around all these different roadways, paths, and everything. So it encompasses everything that includes out to the urban renewal or the urban growth boundary, not just the city boundary. So if all of a sudden we're starting to talk about building industry or houses go out there, when some development comes along, if it's in our plan and it says we need to have a continuation of a bike path or a pedestrian path from this to shopping, or we're going to put industry into an area, it then sizes out the requirements of the infrastructure that has to be mandated by the new development to go into those areas. So this document then, it becomes the blueprint for all infrastructure, transportation infrastructure that might happen in the future within the urban growth boundary that this falls under. So it has a lot of implications to it. But one of the things in bike paths and pedestrian paths is right now we don't have a lot of completion. So we have these little legs and they don't tie together. So when people are out there trying to do a run or jog or a loop, the loop that doesn't complete. And so some of these things like that are very important for creating the types of thinking that in the long term gives us a healthy community.
Yep. And
Thanks.
do we want to look at more bump outs in residential areas, different things like that? So there are a lot of opportunities for improvement.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think with this TSP update, we're actually going to be going to the level of local street connections potentially, or not? Or potential connections?
Yeah, we'll have standards that say for all new streets we'll have minimum or maximum block lengths. Right now we only have minimum block lengths.
So
those will be adopted as a part of the connectivity.
Green streets. Kenema is a historic area with green streets, and this is an opportunity where this type of thinking could play out, where we have natural, you might say, bioswales, which is just off of the asphalt. And so how we approach that, this also has groundwater implications, has all sorts of niceties that we should be thinking out and are real opportunities for a better environment.
That's correct.
One last question now that I heard that. Are all trails in this master plan?
We have major trails in our existing master plan, so we'll stick with that as well. So essentially, yes. We have a trails master plan, which is also adopted ancillary.
Okay.
So the trails master plan was adopted after the TSP, so we'll take all that information, bundle it into the TSP update, so we know where all our trails are, and then what those width requirements are and things like that for trails. And then, also sidewalks and just different places to get around, not necessarily like formalized trails. Are there places where there are informal trails where we should really kind of pump it up and make it so more people can use that area? Different things like that.
One question I had is a lot of what's going on with government at different levels right now is kind of retrenching and cutting back on staff and programs because of budget constraints. Through this planning process, are we going to be looking at new revenue sources, new partner? I'm just trying to, because you can come up with a wonderful plan, but there's no money. There's very little that's going to get implemented.
So that's a good question. We have specifically one, but a couple of the tech memos will address that specifically at funding sources. So we're going to come up with an evaluation of the city and where our opportunities for improvement are. So that will be good whether we have money or not, because as we get money, we can start to work on that. We'll look at our CIP, which is our list of capital improvements, and we'll rank all of our projects. Part of these have to do with criteria for ranking and all those different sort of things. So we'll add projects and we'll rank them, but clearly we can't afford them all. But we do have a very savvy staff member, our public works director and city engineer, Nancy Krushauer, has done a phenomenal job about finding money to make things happen. So we have, in the last few years, we've seen more projects or ways or opportunities. Maybe we can come together as a community and get some of them done. Maybe we're just putting them on the list for right now, but as we get more funds, they'll start to be completed. Or when development occurs and it's around that section, then we'll look at that as well. So if you want to build a piece of property and we say on our trails plan there's a trail going through it, you have to accommodate that as development occurs. So
Laura,
we'll do the best we can.
I have one quick question as far as the type of comment you're looking for. Would you want our comments to be primarily from the perspective of natural resource concerns, or also just as people who live, work in the city?
Good question. Whatever suits your fancy. Whatever you want to do. If you want to look at the document really strictly, and as someone who lives in the city or works in the city, you can do that. We'll hope you'll have keep an eye on natural resources, just to make sure we have flexibility when we abut a buffer or something like that, so we know what to do, what takes priority, and things like that. So comments can be on anything and everything, and as in-depth. We encourage as in-depth as possible, but as much or as little as you want to do. It's all going to be working at your own pace, reading a document and uploading your comments, or just kind of blogging your thoughts.
Thanks.
So who wants to join? Everybody?
I think I could volunteer if I could work with an alternate, just, in case there's scheduling issues for individual meetings, or maybe incorporate a second set of ideas, minds or perceptions.
I would be interested.
Okay. Is there anyone that wants to be primary, secondary? We can also take more than two. So whoever wants to join, we can put you two in those slots.
Would one of us have to be an alternate, or could we both be primary?
Are you seeking comment from both?
Yep. It's really just when we're sitting at the table at those 4 meetings, we want to make sure that each group is represented, and so there'll be a person at the table, and depending on how many other people there, Peanut Gallery may or may not get to speak.
When is the soonest that you need an answer on who's going to be the primary and secondary and all that? Is this something that we can discuss a little later on?
You guys can do it over email. If you just want to throw your hat in the ring, I can kind of mark you down, and then you can switch around people. And then you can be in the open positions if you're not representing NRC. So
Okay.
if you have any interest, just I'll write your name down, and then we can get an email chain going through you, and Pete can organize
Plus, we have
it.
a couple of members
We're missing.
absent, yes.
So
Email may be a good idea.
okay. So
Think so?
I'll send a follow-up email to everyone, and then you guys can sort of reply all, and we can figure it from there. But we're looking forward to a great project.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
you.
work.
Nice presentation.
I guess there's one final question. Is there a certain stage this would come back for some kind of formal input from the committee as a whole?
I think the plan is to start the legislative process at some point down the road, right? Which is when we would start. The legislative process is when you have an application, you're starting formal public comment, and you're taking input from all the groups.
Okay.
NRC, CIC, Parks and Rec,
Okay.
neighborhood associations.
HR.
That would be the point.
Okay.
But as Laura said, they're going to try to get as much comment as they can, starting right off the bat. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you, very good.
All right. So the next item up are our discussion items, and the first item is 4A, which is the election of the officers. I'm sure you're all looking forward to not having me running the meetings anymore. I know I am. But I included in your agendas a copy of what the bylaws say about our elections. So I'll just briefly go over that. We have, according to Article 5 of our bylaws, position of chair, vice chair, and a secretary, who shall be selected by the membership and serve at the pleasure of the membership for one-year terms. Nominations and elections of new officers shall be taken from the floor at the committee's first meeting of each calendar year. Officers may be re-elected. In the event that an officer is unable to complete a specified term, a special election shall be held for the completion of the term. The three positions are the chair. The chair has general supervisory and directional powers over the committee. The chair presides at committee meetings and reviews agendas with the staff liaison. The chair shall be the designated spokesperson for the committee unless this responsibility is delegated to another party. And the chair shall be an ex officio member of all subcommittees. Then you have your vice chair, who serves in the absence of the chair, similar powers in their absence, and generally conducts all business delegated by the chair. And finally, the secretary. The secretary takes minutes for each of the regular meetings and work sessions, and then works with staff on getting those minutes published in a timely fashion. I've been doing that task for the time being, and I'm happy to continue doing it until we have elected secretary. That is not my intention to continue. And the minutes items, the way we typically do the minutes now is we summarize the topic. We're not talking about in great detail what's being done, because we have a video link which is also serves as part of our permanent record for what the committee does. And so if you guys would like to discuss this or how you want to proceed, or whether you want other members to be here before you move forward, go right ahead.
So there's one member not here tonight, is that true?
Marlo is not here, and Richard is not here.
Oh, Richard, that's right.
Yeah.
Pete, did either of them indicate an interest in any of these positions?
I asked both of them, and Richard said he couldn't count on being here with his family business the way it is in that capacity. He's going to, he doesn't see himself serving as an officer. I didn't hear back from Marlo on that issue.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but these are, every year we would re-elect our officers essentially. And it's a consensus-type situation again.
Well, I'm going to act as a historian, which you don't have that position. But since I was on the previous committee, we didn't have ever an identified committee chairman, and it was a big, big problem.
Okay.
Because we didn't stay on task, nor did we communicate to the Planning Commission and the Parks Recreation Advisory Committee, which were our two links that we should have. And I would strongly want to see this group have chairman, vice chairman, and secretary, as you suggest. I do not have an interest in any of those offices. I'm just really busy, and I'm trying to simplify my life. But I've worked with some people that are in this group, and I have my degree of belief in their capabilities. So, I'd like to see us get this resolved tonight if we could. But
Myself, personally, I wouldn't mind stepping in and doing something like a vice chair. Be one to help out. So,
We have a volunteer for vice chair.
Okay. Yeah, I'm chair of the Basin Council, but I would not mind being chair of this group at all.
I second that.
I'm doing it already, so I know I can do it. And
All All right. Do we have any other volunteers?
I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to work in the secretary fashion next month. I'm going to be in Chile, so it'd be kind of hard to take the minutes for the meeting.
Okay. Like I said, in a pinch, I can always step in, but I think we need to designate somebody.
5 minutes could be taken pretty easy by just replaying them back off of the video.
Off of the streaming video.
Take a highlight point off of it and then make a note, so it's not like this is rocket science.
Yeah, that's great. So we have a volunteer for vice chair, and we have a volunteer for chair with a second. Brian as chair and Andrew as vice chair. How does the group feel about that?
I also concur with this slate, but I'm open to other
sorry.
suggestions. And I want you to add a historian, because I'm
And
that old.
do you want to be a subcommittee or another? We could do that, Okay, and so maybe we should wait on the secretary thing, until we have more
anybody
members. Yeah,
Jumping up and down to do it.
yeah, sure. All right, well, great. 283 ain't bad. Great. So I don't believe we need to cast any votes in this regard if we've got a consensus of the group. So we'll take that item as decided with the exception of our secretary. Next item up is item 4B. Let me move on to that. I'm supposed to be clicking through these things as I get to them. Which is the staff's suggestions for a 2012 work plan. And I want to emphasize that these are just suggestions. I'm going to pull these up on your computer. You should be able to see it. Let me know if you can't. And then we can just run down these, and I'll try to explain my reasoning and some of our reasoning for these. We have a scope of activities in our bylaws, which is a very large list of things. It's fairly broad. One of our ongoing charges as a committee is to review that scope of activities and draw from it and pull projects that implement that scope of activities. So that's sort of that's Article 4 of our bylaws, and I recommend looking it over every now and then, deciding if it's pertinent. We also have the City Commission milestones, which are the City Commission's adopted milestones, and which are pertinent for the NRC. 2011, 2012, the milestone was to address the Cove Peninsula stabilization, erosion, and reforestation of public lands. Several things going on here. With regard to the Cove, as you're no doubt aware, and what Paul alluded to earlier, the Cove Peninsula itself is an area that is subject to forces and hydrology on both sides. Not only that, but there's erosion concerns on top. Recently, there was a BMX track discovered that needed to be restored, a significant amount of hand excavation and a lot of vegetation removed for that illegal BMX track out there on the peninsula. So those are the sorts of things that we're concerned about. And I know if Richard was here, he would like to talk about this in much more detail. The erosion, city has erosion control standards for all development, but then we have erosion that's going on outside of all of our development review. We have the natural erosion that occurs in our steep slope areas and along our streams, which are in dire need of stabilization in certain areas due to invasive species and the associated impacts of that. So, are we being comprehensive enough in our approach towards erosion control in the city? That's one of the questions we need to ask. and review as a committee, and determine how we can best address that problem through actions outside of the land use review component, through events, restoration, grant programs, and things of that nature. Finally, reforestation of public lands. This kind of gets towards what we were talking about with regard to our public lands and street trees and park forest canopy. The city does not currently have a urban forest management plan, although we do have street tree standards, and we have a parks department and a limited amount of staff who are in charge of maintaining the tree canopy in those areas. The heritage tree designation process that we have in place was adopted about 2 years ago, and the NRC is charged with reviewing recommendations for heritage tree designation on both public and private land. And we have received 2 applications for designation, one on public lands and another on private property, which I'll be bringing up before you as a future agenda items. So,
Isn't there a deadline for those this year, real soon?
No, I know the county has a deadline for their heritage tree process, but ours can occur any time of the year.
Okay.
You know, if we get a slew of them, we may have to think about timelines and things like that. But the idea is that the ones that are, if they're on if a tree is on public property, any member of the public can designate it as a heritage tree, and then that is forwarded to the city commission by the community development director, who will make a determination as to whether it needs that designation or not. On private land, it requires owner consent, and that's the big difference between the two. The benefit of a heritage tree designation on private property is you have an asset, which is of historic importance and a heritage tree. And then on public land, obviously you can retain groves of public trees and allow for normal maintenance and restoration, but the idea is that they would be not impacted by development if they're designated as such and be permanently protected. In most cases, the heritage tree process requires the opinion of our arborist as to the condition and health of whatever tree or trees are being designated, and then some sort of commitment to long-term maintenance of that tree by the owner of the property. So that's kind of the heritage tree process.
Pete, could we back up just for 1 second? Under the reforestation, what's the primary goals looking to be achieved through the reforestation?
Well, I think you have to start with knowledge of where you are and where you want to be. The Audubon Society took a look at our urban forest canopy based on aerial photography in 2008, and I think they said we had about 26% for urban forest canopy compared to Lake Oswego, who has like 40%, highest in the metro region, and also has a very aggressive program of tree protection ordinances on both public and private land. That is the difference. It's a policy decision that Lake Oswego has chosen to make and fund. Oregon City is like a lot of cities in that we don't have a private forestry ordinance. We have a development review ordinances and we have public street tree ordinances, and that constitutes the bulk of our tree protection ordinances. And there's 2 big reasons for that. One is property rights, and 2 is funding. In other words, you're going to move towards private regulation of trees, you have to be willing to expect a certain amount of backlash from people with respect to their private property rights. And then you also need expertise of either a city arborist or a contracting arborist, as well as code enforcement staff to enforce the regulations that you have.
But I guess
So,
what I'm talking about with reforestation goals, what are the beyond simply increasing the percentage of canopy within the
Right.
city, are there other broader goals the city's trying to achieve through the reforestation? I think that's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to. Is
Sorry. Certainly, related to water quality, canopy cover is a huge contributor to the lowering the temperature of water going into the Clackamas and Willamette River to the extent that we can shade our streets and impervious surfaces.
Okay.
We have landscaping standards for parking, street tree standards, and those sorts of things. But we also have Public Works, stormwater crew has done shading. They have done shading studies of some of our creeks and have identified areas where more shade is needed. And those would be priority areas for reforestation. You could use those maps that are already available along the Abernathy drainage and Newell Creek and say, look, these are clearly priority areas for reforestation. They don't necessarily occur on city-owned land, though. They may occur on private land as well. So, yeah. But to the extent that those two overlap, it's a no-brainer. So that's that. So any other questions on that one? That's the City Commission milestone. I'll get to it a little bit further down the list. Part of that reforestation goal would be, reestablishing the tree subcommittee. We have a standing subcommittee listed in our bylaws, which is our tree subcommittee. It can be, the makeup of that subcommittee can be the entire NRC, one member of the NRC, and any ad hoc members who wish to serve on that committee. And the subcommittee would be tasked with fairly concrete tasks as well as more overreaching tree policy tasks. The concrete tasks, the ones that we could potentially attain this year, would be updating our street tree lists, which are fairly out of date. They don't reflect a lot of the newer and more appropriate hybrids that are on the metro lists as well as other municipalities' lists. And so that would be an easy one. And then we need to reevaluate in concert with that what are some of the species that we really shouldn't have on our list anymore. I know we've got some Norway maple hybrids, and in concert with the street tree list update, we'll be looking at our street tree standards, our street standards as well, because we currently have a minimum planter strip width of local streets of 4.5 feet. And if there's any way to increase that planter strip to allow for extra rooting area for street trees, it helps to alleviate several problems. One is the damage to sidewalks that we get when we don't have the right tree growing in the right place. And the second is we get a better tree canopy cover because we're getting bigger trees on our roadsides. And that's a problem that the Planning Department and Public Works has been addressing on a lot of our subdivisions that have been approved in the 80s and 90s were only approved with 3-foot planter strips, and subsequently we were getting very significant damage on our sidewalks without even having much of a tree canopy along our streets. And then the property owner abutting those planter strips is responsible for all of the costs of replacement of both the tree and the sidewalk. So it's kind of a cycle that we're trying to deal with as we move forward. And if we can update that standard this year, that would be a significant improvement of our current policies. The second task along this for the tree subcommittee would be application to the Tree City USA program, which has 4 standards. One is having a body that overlooks tree policy, and so that could be the tree subcommittee. And then you have to observe Arbor Day or Arbor Week. It doesn't have to be in April, it just coincides with the national one. We have to show that we're spending $2 per capita on tree programs. We did an evaluation of this 2 years ago and saw that we were we'd already exceeded that amount, and we would just need to update those numbers. And then we have to have, at a minimum, a public tree ordinance, which we already have. So if we have all these 4 items, we just submit it to the Arbor Day Foundation through the Oregon Department of Forestry, get into the program, get the program running, and then each year we improve it. There's a lot of esteem associated with being a Tree City USA. It definitely puts a public face on the fact that the city has made tree canopy cover in the city a priority. It allows us to qualify for other grant programs, and we also are able to leverage the expertise of urban forestry experts and that sort of thing. Third item is for the tree subcommittee is to make recommendations for a program to assist with tree planting in public areas and with consenting private landowners. In this regard, we'd be looking at creating incentives for protection of trees on private land, looking at matching grants, funds, and donations, possibly collaborating with Friends of Trees and schools and with the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee to have tree planting events and that sort of thing. I'd spoken with the director of Friends of Trees last year, and it is a matching grant program, so they will operate in Oregon City if the city steps up and puts a certain amount of money towards the program. Their focus is on establishing local experts. So they'll train a volunteer in the community to act as a trainer for other citizens in the tree planting process, and then they donate materials and tree planting materials through that program.
It has to be a hard match, it can't be a soft match.
I believe it can be a soft match as well. So we'll be looking at that in more detail. And then finally, the NRC and the Tree Subcommittee would be reviewing nominations submitted for Heritage Tree and Heritage Grove designation. So that would be the first task, reestablishing the Tree Subcommittee. Second task that we're suggesting is coordinating with staff on addressing the milestones with respect to the Cove Peninsula and erosion control. And then finally, the third task is ongoing activities per the scope of activities. Those are staff suggestions, and you are free to add or take away from that list as you wish. I'm sure there will be a little more discussion of this. The idea with the work plan is that we do one every year, and once we agree on that, we send it to the City Commission for their blessing and move forward with it as a project list. Yeah. So if you have any questions, please shoot.
From a historical perspective, there was never a work plan in the previous Natural Resource Committee, not because the committee's failing or the city's failing, it just didn't happen.
Right.
Therefore, there's a very good ordinance, which has a ton of things in it, which we've all seen, I guess, and we've seen it, that establishes this body that addresses things that aren't even in your work list. But fundamental to that, I feel very strongly that we need a calendar progression this year, that we follow a schedule that we're going to attempt to, say, for instance, work in diligence with Laura on her transportation safety plan as we see fit, that we will report to the Parks Recreation Advisory Committee, who is equal to us. We are both advisory committees with no judicial powers, that we then would report to the Planning Commission, which does have judicial powers that we need to interface with, that we'd have a calendar that suggests milestones that we'd like to achieve for the year, including these things that you feel are important. I agree with you, too, the tree subcommittee and so forth. Instead of just having things happen and we react to them, that we are following a path to meet some standards for the year in an orderly fashion.
Pete, I shared a work plan outline with you that I developed for the city of Tigard, and I think it's pretty much what Jerry's talking about, where we just identify certain activities and kind of timelines and things like that, and maybe there's a way, whatever gets adopted,
Sure.
to format it in that work plan outline. That way we can kind of monitor where we're at and see if really wind up doing what we said we were going to do.
Okay, yeah, I will be sure to pick that up, and we can reuse it for our needs, yeah.
The other thing, I have a whole bunch of little things on my little checkbox here. Since
writing
you gave me
them
that
down.
agenda to look at. This Trail News is the vehicle that communicates to the community about the city, other than what you see in the newspapers. This Trail News has nothing in it about natural resource issues. Seems like we could apply a little effort to create a release that describes what we're doing, what our efforts are, like other things. Very simple. I do news releases all the time. I probably do 5 to 6 a month at least for various things that I'm trying to help or whatever. I'd be glad to do that, but it seems like we need to communicate to the public what we're doing in addition to what they see on the TV coverage.
Right.
Do you mind if I just talk about a couple other points here?
Go for it.
All right. It seems like we have a reforestation need. We also need a deforestation policy. I can think of some things, and I'm not being negative here, where 800 trees disappeared in one project area. I was hoping to, and at the end of our discussion, talk to you about the Cove, where 800 trees will remain, mostly, which is amazing, all right? So I think that we need to not only look at the issue of replacing canopy that's been lost, but trying to make sure we don't lose any more, because I feel personally very strongly about the biomass of this community going away. I'm talking about living biomass, okay? The woody and green things. I also feel like that we need to very much look at reviewing the role of outside agencies with this community called Oregon City. What I'm saying is I learned, not because I wanted to, but in the last 4 years about the role of Division of State Lands, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA Fisheries, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, State Lands Division, DEQ. I know what they do, but I don't know that, and I know their responsibilities and our responsibilities as a city with them, but I don't know that everyone else knows this, and I'm not the person to communicate that. There is a state ombudsman that could do that and give us a kind of a look at who has jurisdiction over what, because on a lot of things that are coming before the city, I think there are times that the agencies do need to be involved. So that's something I'd like to have us look at. And I think that the one other thing I felt pretty strongly about was, again, that calendar of progression that fits into our work plan, so that we're, following a path.
So the calendar would basically assess, how much of a task has been achieved in a certain time. It could roll over from year to year. If we
Sure.
haven't- yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah.
also it could assign responsibility too.
Assigns
So we identify
responsibility to
even within
individual
the
members.
committee,
Yeah.
like who's doing some on transportation,
Right.
who's heading up the tree subcommittee, just all
I think
those
that's a
different
critical
things.
part of it. You have to have an individual responsible for each task. Yeah. hmm Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Jerry. I think we can definitely work that into the program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of what we need to do actually will involve public education, so using that publication is one way. If you're going to have a street tree list, you have to educate people about the street tree list, or else it won't be used. And so on and so forth,
The way that it currently works is, Laura and I have published a series of guides for tree removal and replacement, and when the issue comes up, we give that information out over the phone, on the website, or by hand. But we'd be happy for you guys to review it and tell us whether you think it needs to be improved, simplified, lengthened, then whatever. Yeah.
Pete, I think I've got 3 things. One thing is, blue heron site's going to be a big and ongoing issue, and I'm sure some way we'll interface with that, but need to be kind of proactive and get orientation if there's any information about the whole heritage process, just to kind of be in the game on that, so that it's not like, well, this is what we all decided, and we want you guys to support it. it's not much fun. So the Blue Heron site, it seems like there's at least some legitimate concerns, or we can be responsive to citizens by at least acknowledging or somehow finding out more about this whole Conema lands process. And the third thing is, I know a lot of people, get kind of pressed for time and things. I'm wondering if there's some way to incorporate this tree subcommittee, maybe, instead of having a different meeting night for that, maybe make that part of a regular agenda item as part of this meeting, or maybe it meets before this meeting. I'm not sure how it was done before, but I'm trying to figure out, what can you do to make it productive and proceed without trying to make it just another night that some other group of people have to get together in addition to this meeting night.
Sure. I think it'd probably be worthwhile to have an item on the NRC's agenda where the person who is the liaison for the NRC liaison for that subcommittee, whoever it ends up being, report back to the NRC regular regular meetings. Yeah.
Is not one of our members an arborist? I think I'm looking at him. Is that not true?
I am, yes.
All right. Plus, you work for a Saltwater Conservation Service,
Yes.
which is excellent combination there. That liaison issue is very important. I can explain from a historical perspective again. The tree subcommittee met on a different night with arborists and botanists and others, and especially a lot of park managers and facility managers like Lewis and Clark College's Brown's maintenance chair was there. She lives here in Oregon City. Staff was there to help, and the intention was to draft this ordinance, which you now have adopted through your efforts. And they even had an open house to announce what they'd done at the Pioneer Community Center in the lower meeting room to let people give public comment. About 50 people showed up to give public comment, and then the effort to get it adopted went through Pete's hands, basically, I think, to get formalized. So they were a task force, kind of a beginning and ending cycle, but their dream was to do what you'd like to do, and that is Tree City USA designation. Is Westland such a...
Well, you have your tree ordinances, which are in effect, and then you have, sort of running alongside that, you have Tree City USA, which is a concurrent process, and I believe Westland has it. I'm not really sure. And I think they run together. From what I understand, the most important aspect from a regulatory standpoint to be a Tree City USA is having a public tree ordinance, which we do have. And we did have already when we started work on the revisions to the code back in 2005. What changed was the heritage tree designation process. That got added in. I think there was some discussion about attempting to regulate trees on private property back then, and there was a lot of discussion at the Planning Commission level and the City Commission level whether or not they wanted to adopt an ordinance that regulated trees on private property back then. I got to be candid, and staff's recommendation was that they not do it unless they were prepared to fund such a program. It was basically a funding issue because they had limited staff and that sort of thing, not to mention the private property issue. It's still it's an evolving process. The tree ordinance that we have in place it's good. It functions okay. It doesn't get to the level of what you would call incentive based. It's not like but the City Commission has made significant changes to our tree protection ordinances as well. New residential development is required to either preserve or plant a minimum of 4 inches of trees on any new residential site, which is good. And then, in addition to that, we updated our tree protection code for the development review process. So, related to what we were talking about earlier, one of the things that we need to do is go over what our land use regulations say about natural resources and trees in general and how they function. And we'll be doing sort of a land use 101 presentation at an upcoming session to talk about that.
Pete, when we put together this kind of work plan, because I know there's a request to participate like in the planning process here.
Yeah.
If we can get the kind of one-time, ongoing, fixed length, but the whole range of activities just on that same plan, because I think it isn't kind of like what you know, it's the kind of thing you get tripped up on because you didn't realize you're also going to be reviewing. I think what we need to do is refer to one document that would have everything that we're anticipating, like over the course of the year, because that way we kind of figure out workload and representation and kind of doing stuff. It's kind of like the things, reviewing comp plans. If that's going to take a lot of time or effort, then you have to kind of balance how much time and energy is left to take on something else. And
Well, one thing I've noticed, Bob, is that, you have a demand for a tree subcommittee, but a lot of what the NRC also ended up working on and will end up working on is what is their purview with respect to land use cases, and how are they advisory to staff and the Planning Commission with respect to natural resources. The way that we approached this in the past would be I would bring all the land use cases that were currently open before you, and then discuss whether or not there was a overlay district concern, whether that designated by the city or not. And so we tended to focus on the ones that actually were going to impact an overlay district. Or if there was no overlay district on that parcel of land, where were the significant trees that were either going to be preserved or removed, and those sorts of things. So as staff, my job would be to focus the NRC on what the actual natural resource issues were for that particular land use application, and then you're free to comment on it, and in writing or whatever. And that is actually in your bylaws now. You have the purview to comment on land use applications that may significantly affect natural resources.
how many of those cases would you say there might be in an average year?
It depends on the market. It's been slow the last 2 years, but we have a staff of 3, and we typically are handling 6 or 7 cases at a time. But obviously 2007 and 2006, 2007, 2008 were very big residential permit years, and that's when a lot of the issues with the high-density zoned areas that removed a lot of trees came to the forefront, because they were zoned for a certain type of development, and they had a lot of trees on some of the parcels, and they removed the trees as they were allowed to do back then, and had very little mitigation. The difference now is that we do have mitigation for trees that are removed, and it's very much a higher bar that you have to meet. And the number of trees that you have to replace, depending on where the tree is removed, is a lot higher now. We did an analysis, just for example, where a parcel of land that was zoned residential had approximately 700 or 800 trees on it, had been a woodlot, had been managed as a woodlot, but had since not been, cut in the last 10 years. And the value of those trees, the tree mitigation value came to about $600,000 if they would have had to pay fee in lieu. So that was an example, and those trees are still standing. The owner of that lot has the right to remove them, but we have an approval from the planning director, and the city commission is aware of what the mitigation requirements are for that, because it was a woodlot. Yeah. So those are the sorts of things you'd be reviewing land use wise. Yeah.
Does the city have a policy of still requiring mitigation if it's developed after cutting?
Well, let's say the land is in the city but not being proposed for development at this time. There is no protection on those trees right now. So that's where you get to that gap in the regulations. You don't have a current protection on land that's not being developed and it's private. A lot of cities and the county attempted to pass an ordinance to protect the UGB trees, the land between the city limit and the urban growth boundary. And as far as I'm aware, after 2 years of public hearings, they have been unsuccessful with passing a workable ordinance because of the number of complexities, regulatory complexities of that.
So if an individual owned property, cut down the trees, and later on decide to develop it, you wouldn't be required to mitigate it because it wasn't part of the development process.
Right, correct.
Right.
Yeah, that's the way it is right now. I mean, and you could bring your land into the city, let's say, and it was a zone timber, and you brought it into the city and the zoning changed. You could still have, but there might be a situation where you still have a right to log it because it's a forest deferment parcel, and you have to, in order for you to keep your forest tax deferral, you actually have to log a certain amount.
Yeah, and reforest.
Yeah, as a
You're
forest.
actually
Yeah.
required to reforest, too.
Right, and you're required to replant, too, because you're under Forest Practices Act. There's very few equations of that I'm aware of in our UGB, but there are a few. And then you get the situation now that you're in the city, you've got a standard timber, and you're not really sure what's going to happen to it. So, and those are the situations where people see a lot of trees come down in a very short time and really have a visceral reaction to it. But you got to remember that the process of designating that land use was a public process. And the owner of that property has a right to develop that property based on that land use designation. So it's very important that if we're going to regulate all trees in the city, that we do it through a public process, as opposed to being arbitrarily looking at parcels and then applying criteria at this point in time, whereas we're not doing the same thing on that parcel at a different time. Those are very important things to bear in mind.
Your city administrator, David Fraser, and I had a long talk when he first got here about a number of things, and his dream was to see a mitigation strategy on public lands that you own here, which I've now come to call, since you refer to tax increment financing as a strategy to help advance urban area development, the costs being distributed over time and the recovery of the costs through new taxes. I'm suggesting a concept of growth increment financing, all right, where the value you just talked about earlier in a piece of land, the woodlot, for instance, having a $600,000 value in terms of mitigation worth is far greater than cutting that wood could ever yield to that person, that kind of concept kind of start coming forward. And 2 years ago, Oregon State University, as they always hold their tree school every year, held a special workshop on carbon sequestration for woodlot owners, and I took special interest in that.
Yeah.
Of course, in Europe, that they have gotten that in place and have kept it in place in spite of their economy. But the whole idea that these trees have value is what you were talking to, and I know your administrator has this in his heart as something that you would like to see. If you can't do it on private land, can you do it on the vacant public lands, which are, a lot of the city. So,
yeah, I mean, even if it's on a small-scale local level, it's going to have an impact here.
Yeah.
And I think, to the extent that these programs are regional in focus, they have that much more power. And I think it is important to look at what we call the current non-market benefits of these things.
and that annual wood volume increase has another value too to the climate issues and so forth. But from just a one-to-one or whatever the requirements are for replacement of trees in your various scenarios of development, there's a lot of value in building up that mitigation bank on public land.
Well, we've been looking at, using our current aerial photography, we've been looking at gaps in our forest canopy on public land. And we've identified some areas, and I'll be happy to share those with you, for replanting of large heritage trees. David is really, really behind this idea and has actually put some funding into the budget for it, which is great. We just need to find a few more nurseries that actually stock the size of trees, because, we can, what he'd like to do is find a nursery that provides some pretty good-sized trees to get in the ground, and that's what we're looking for right now. Yeah.
What's the point? I mean, larger trees cost more money
I know.
than the smaller trees.
Yeah.
Is it just trying to achieve immediate benefits, or what's the...
I believe, I think the focus of that project, it's a specific project, is visible gateways to the city, immediate benefits. So,
Yeah, there's-
and specific heritage tree species.
There's other benefits of larger size, like reduced vandalism. The smaller the tree, the more likely it's going to be destroyed
Yeah.
by the public.
Yeah,
And so there's a whole range of things that
yeah,
play into that. The survival, though, is not necessarily better in larger trees.
right, yeah. Yeah, I agree, and that is sort of a side project that we're working on, too, in addition to the stormwater shading areas that we need to concentrate on as well. So, so any other items that we should be looking at, 2012 specifically?
Pete, who's really addressing climate change at the city level, or how's that really, I mean, does it just get kind
Yeah.
of dispersed, or, I mean, I actually believe in it, but,
The Mayor Norris signed the mayor's agreement for climate change two years ago, which I believe is, the city is sort of bound to that resolution. I'm happy to get a copy of it and go over it with you all. It kind of goes back to what are the specific policies that we do. Within the city, functioning within an Oregon urban growth boundary land use regulatory environment that we do, they've already made we already have a comprehensive plan and a zoning code that focuses on urban development within a specified area and providing efficient land use. And a lot of people would call that low-hanging fruit in terms of land use policy, and it implements itself through reduced vehicle miles traveled, and that's one approach.
okay.
Yeah.
Anything over and above what we'd be doing anyway?
Well, we have, building standards for efficient buildings. I don't believe we've gotten to the point of requiring LEED standards for certain types of development yet. A lot of cities like Portland have, a regulation that says any new public building has to be LEED certified, which means that, the building materials and the site design need to be environmentally benign. We're not in Oregon City yet to the point of what you would call eco-district design yet. That's something that they're exploring in Portland. And it's something that the planning staff is aware of, but it's not in part of our comprehensive plan or land use policies yet.
Maybe there's even a work plan item where we just kind of explore what would be a logical or supportable step beyond what's already there. I'm trying, how do you push the envelope, or how do you get greater benefits than what's already in place? I don't have the answer to that, but I'm just thinking, it seems like the carbon dioxide level keeps going up and up in the atmosphere, so probably somebody has to do more, or we all have to do more.
Well, maybe, I guess if you look at it, like all the regulations and stuff that we already have in place, a lot of it does have to deal with global warming as one of them. I mean, we're planting trees, and we're adding back into that, and then we have air quality standards as well. And all that plays into a big effect in global warming. And a lot of stuff that I think we're doing here is we're dealing with state comprehensive planning, and then it's just coming to us at a local level, and then we're playing catch up, and then we're having to deal with a lot of the people and their privatized land and that issue between growth. So I think as far as like global warming is concerned, it's already in there, and it's something that they keep on EPA's constantly looking at
I think
as an
Yeah.
issue.
I think, yeah, like you say, Andrew, we've got several agencies that are worried about the same issue. I think from the city's perspective, you know, our comprehensive plan was last adopted in 2004. The mayor has started to, you know, make inroads to when are we going to start updating that plan, and how are we going to implement some of these policies that we didn't really address when we did it last. Climate change would be one of them. We haven't been told by DLCD that we need to update our comprehensive plan yet. You know, that's sort of typically when they would do it. But and we have obviously several interim projects that get right to the heart of the same issue. You know, we can really focus on this issue through our transportation system, but also through our land use policies and building standards. So certainly, I think the way to start that process is to evaluate what the policy is that we have on the books now and see whether we're implementing that. I haven't read that document in a while. But I think it's something that we should look at and see where to go next.
Brian made a comment about public education or public outreach, and in my previous life, running an environmental center, we did about 100 classes per year, of which our intent was to do at least 3 to 4 seminars per year. And I feel like this group could be a lead group to do a couple things. The man on the end of this row here leads an effort in environmental services, I believe, or your organization does, Saltwater Conservation Service. Your offices are below the offices where Pete and Laura work. And I think it would be really neat to let the community know what the environmental services of the ecosystem is called Oregon City. And I think that's what you guys are experts at, that kind of thing. That would be an example of a workshop we could do. This agency thing, I can't tell you how important it is. When somebody has a gripe about something, they don't know who to talk to. The agencies generally will talk to them, but you don't know what to do. Another workshop on, you know, what the agency's roles are. The Corps of Engineers was founded by a president who was assassinated, before he got assassinated, by the name of Abraham Lincoln. He got Grant together, the great general, with Sherman, the great general that tore up the South, to figure out how to reconstruct this country a month or two before he died, and formed the Army War College of Engineers, which is designated on the maps that founded Oregon City. You look at the maps of Oregon City, they are signed by certain lieutenants and so forth. I'm talking about the early history of this community, by the Army War College Engineers. That's a very important agency that people should know about. You know, a little bit more about the history of it and so forth. I guess I'm suggesting here it'd be neat to do some workshops. We could handle 1 or 2 a year that would really improve the stature, one, of what we're doing and meet the needs perhaps that you have of public education and some of the things you guys do as planners.
Great.
And give us something really positive to focus around.
Yeah, I think if you can do these in collaboration with Greater Oregon City Watershed Council as well, and
Sure.
Maybe we can come together and do something at Pioneer Center, make a location, or off-site, and do a site visits of that nature.
It's kind of a cliche to kind of do it around. I don't know. Earth Day is getting kind of diffused because people seem to be celebrating it like before the 22nd of April and after the 22nd or whatever. But maybe there's a way if you have one thing oriented around Earth Day that time of year because people seem to focus on natural resource conservation issues, and maybe something in the fall. You know, just something that gives some kind of
Events.
balance to the year, and you can make it kind of
bookends.
seasonally appropriate.
What do you think of that idea?
Good. Good idea.
Yeah, because the Earth Day event would kind of
Right.
come right after.
There's been an Earth Day cleanup in a long time. Not because it just the
No.
day got moved to the Solvent Day cleanup, which is normally in April, later in April, but
Yeah, that's
used to be called Earth Day led to the Solvent program.
yeah. Okay,
But yeah, that's a wonderful idea.
that's a great idea.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that idea.
Well, okay.
Okay.
Clean up there.
I will take the Tigard model and shoehorn some of these ideas into it, in addition to the ones that I mentioned. and bring that back before you for a future agenda item.
So, sometime you go, can we get some people in talking more about that Kanema from more perspectives?
Yeah, I've got that on the list for future agenda item. I'll talk to Brian with Metro, see where they're at. We also have to get back to you with a report on the Cove. So those are 3 items.
Yeah, and that's specifically the peninsula area that you're...
Yeah, the peninsula area and the gravel bar buildup. Paul Edgar of Kanema Neighborhood Association is very concerned about the Lake Oswego project. I'll be happy to look into that in more detail and see what the status of that is and
Yeah,
what the relationship.
essentially they have water rights to a fairly large amount of water from the Clackamas, which they will be taking out down in that plant down low.
Let's see.
They're in the process of building a major water plant. They will be supplying Tigard with water as part of the project.
Yeah.
And of course, there's regulations that are in place so that they can't take out enough water to damage fish, because they're federally protected, so they can't overdo it, especially, when the water's very, very low, but, year-round, too,
Yeah.
because you can't do anything to endanger the salmon at this point in time. But it's a fair amount of water.
Yeah.
It's going to go out of basin.
Pete, is there some kind of technical report document, this whole thing about leachate from the old dump and getting into the, this is the first time I've heard about it. I didn't know if, it's common knowledge or if there's some...
I don't know, to be honest. I would be happy to check into it and see.
Yeah.
There was a water intake for Gladstone that had to shut down because of it.
Right, I can give you the history on that.
Yeah, Jerry
The
knows.
facility ran for 20 years through even 1964's flood, producing clean water when the mountain line that went up the Clackamas got washed away in 1964's great flood. The Gladstone pump station, sending its water across the 9090 bridge, because it's on this side of the river, that's where my River Resource Museum is, supplied 3 cities, Oregon City, Westland, and Gladstone during that flood, because the mountain line was gone, South Fork water was not possible, and it was a very successful collection device that took water from 70 feet below ground level and then filtered it through the gravel strata of the Clackamas. Half the Clackamas is underground, in the aquifer called gravel strata in that area. But when Rossman's landfill began to be elevated more and more in height, then the saturation rains at this time of the year, and then floods rising, the water table around Rossman's would up and down, this constant motion would cause leachate to begin to move out. And that pump station, believe it or not, picked up that leachate and drew it towards it, 1.5 miles from Rossman's. And they had to shut down that facility. I've got the whole history on it. About 25 years ago, because of chromium, cadmium, lead, and arsenic. Now, where would that come from? Hopefully not the background level of the Clackamas River. It actually moved it through the gravel strata because it's deeper than the bottom of the cove by at least 30 feet through that gravel strata towards it. And they had to abandon that water supply. They were having iron problems in everyone's toilets and sinks and bathtubs. That's not bad enough. They were beginning to notice health problems. And so City of Gladstone went after the people who dug the cove and the people who were also simultaneously building the landfill and asked for remediation. And they could never solve it, to be honest with you. But they did stop the infilling of the cove. There's a lobe of land in the cove about 4 acres in size that's demolition material. Was the beginning of the refilling of the cove with demolition and garbage was their intention. And Gladstone, City of Gladstone, stopped that from occurring because their pump station would be totally destroyed. So anyway, the groundwater pollution in the area around Rossman's, from Holcomb Hill all the way west to the Clackamas and all the way upriver to River Shore Hotel, you cannot legally drill a well anywhere in that area because the entire aquifer is polluted. So, is that good news? No, but that's the news.
Thanks for the history.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good to know. Any other
Sad.
future agenda items you want to add specifically?
Oh, when we put together that work plan, we're supposed to have a couple of joint meetings a year, right?
We have to have a meeting with PrAC, preferably twice a year would be good.
What does PrAC stand
Sorry,
for?
Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, which is the committee that advises Scott Archer and Denise Kai, our Deputy Parks Director, in that regard. So with respect to anything on public lands, parks in particular, that's a good coordination there. We have several other committees that, you can meet and greet. I think the Planning Commission's going to want to meet you fairly soon here, just to discuss things. And, even if I think maybe do it at the Planning Commission public comment period where we could just do a quick round robin hello kind of thing, or we can have something more substantial once we get some issues to review.
It'd be kind of nice to get our work plan together before meeting with the planning.
I agree. Yeah, we'll go with this. We'll take our work plan up to the City Commission, and then we'll deal with
You
that.
mean you don't want to tell the planning commission we have no plan?
And I anticipate we'll have a list of short-term items and long-term items and that sort of thing. The next item on the agenda, Brian, do you want to take over the meeting?
Sure.
Okay.
And I guess I should get back to the agenda. I haven't exactly went over it. Is that
Well, we're on number 6 now.
staff communication?
Let me click on that. I haven't been
Yeah.
good about that. So this is where I share some information with you, but I think we've been over a lot of this stuff already. With respect to Blue Heron, let's see, Metro has expressed an interest in buying the site. What you've seen in the newspapers is as much as we know about it yet. We don't know what other parties have bid on the property, and we don't have a dollar figure in mind. I don't know if Metro is even...
They probably don't know, from
Yeah.
what I gather.
Yeah.
And they chose not to make an actual bid, but
Right.
just express interest.
Right.
What's the timeline?
They've already cut off more bids, but
Yeah.
nobody knows what has been bid. So it's really up in the air. Metro
Mm-hmm.
may or may not get it.
Yeah, that's yeah. What else? The Ermatinger House, let's see, we did receive a Metro grant for rehabilitation of the Ermatinger House, which is Christina Robertson Gardner's project, our historic preservation planner, which is good news for them.
Metro Enhancement Grant or Metro?
Metro Capital Grant, I believe, which is a little different pot of money.
From Metro, the organization?
Yeah. And so they're moving forward with architectural plans for the restoration. Yeah. What else? Do you have anything else?
Just as a general notice, we've announced our closure date for Highway 213. The highway's going to be closed in the section between Washington Street and Interstate 205, so you won't be able to get on or off the freeway from 213. This closure will allow us to take that superstructure, that bridge that's right next to it that we're building, you can see south of the interchange, and move it into place. It's on a rail system. So during those 4 days, that underpass will be moved into place, and then they'll pave it and whatnot. The closure date has been announced for March 22nd, which is a Thursday right before spring break. It's going to close at 8 p.m. and it will be closed for maximum of up to 104 hours, which calculates out till Tuesday at 4 a.m. So that first weekend of spring break, we are anticipating massive traffic grid lock. We're calling it a catastrophe. So plan ahead if you have any spring break travel plans and you might want to get out of town early, or be aware that this closure is going on. It's a furlough day. The county, most of them won't be operating. The courthouse hasn't issued any tickets for those days. So we're anticipating fewer traffic, but there's 65,000 cars per day that go on 213 in that segment.
How many?
65,000. So our message to the public is to stay away from Oregon City for those 4 days. And if you are here, I would expect extreme gridlock no matter where you are in the city. And even up 205, we're going to have notices on I-5 directing people away from 205.
What's this modification going to do again?
So it's part of the Jug Handle Project. If you want to go to jughandleproject.com, you can learn more about it. It's the interchange at 213 in Washington. They're going to make it so if you're on Clackamas River Drive right now, you have to sit at 213 and wait for the light. There's going to be an underpass. So they're reducing those conflicts. So traffic will be able to move much easier, and it will reduce congestion. So they're putting in a roundabout towards Clackamas River Drive, and then there'll be the underpass. You can see the roads start to take place kind of by Home Depot and Metro. And so during the closure period, they've built the underpass structure, and they're moving it into place. By closing the road for 4 days, it allowed us to reduce the total construction time by 6 months, and we can also keep every lane open during the day. So it keeps traffic flowing for the year-long project, and reduces the total time as well. There's web cameras there, so you can kind of watch it as it moves. So I suggest going to the website. It's a good website, jughandleproject.com.
The other item I should mention is the Public Works Department's been working on updating the city's water distribution system master plan, which is our, pipe water that we get from South Fork Water Board and distribute throughout the city. Long-term plan within the urban growth boundary for existing improvements, future improvements, and the capital improvement program through 2030 for the water master plan. It's been reviewed by the Planning Commission and recommended for approval. It's going to the City Commission on Wednesday. I'll be presenting it on Wednesday. That is an ancillary document to our comprehensive plan, like the transportation system plan, and it was time for an update of that too. So it's not too late to get comments in on that process. We expect there may be more than one hearing at the City Commission level before it's adopted. It's complicated by the fact that we have a charter-mandated water rate rollback, and subsequently we can have a master plan that guides growth of the water system within the urban growth boundary to serve our comprehensive plan areas, and how that is funded through our capital improvement program. We can make recommendations in that regard, but the City Commission is going to have a separate discussion entirely with respect to the charter, and they're just about to embark on that process separately, just so as you know. And in that regard, I think the next time I come before you, I will include as an agenda item a synopsis of land use cases for you. I'll just go through it as a summary item on every meeting. This is from here on out, and congratulations to our new officers.
I had one other thing.
One other item?
Yeah,
Here.
right.
Yeah.
I'll just send these around the horn. And what I was going to do originally, which, I'm not sure whether I can do that or not, but in the future, if there's something important that relates to another community interest, I'd like a way to be able to present that like
Sure.
Paul did, but I will be quicker.
Yeah, you can get it to me a week in advance.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay, I wanted to just give you an update here on the Cove, a little bit about the Cove, from a standpoint of another group. This group ceased to exist after 2007, the one that we're now a part of. And so in that time, there was another effort that came together called the Heritage Waters Habitat Task Force that started last March. And the intention of that group was to do some things to look at the cove, the developments that these developers had done in other areas, look at things in Gladstone, look at things in West Lynn, with the primary purpose being to be an advocate and supporter of good things that were stewarding the environment in a proper direction. So what I gave you here was some accounts of public information that came out about the Heritage Waters Habitat Task Force, and some of our members work in different areas. The Habitat Task Force consists of 22 people. It's an ad hoc kind of group. We have no jurisdictional control over anything. I had to point that out to your chief planner, Tony, when he came down to see who we were. And the first thing I told him was we have no jurisdiction. So he liked that. And then we went on a tour of the cove with him and started talking about retaining certain areas of more trees with a developer. We have a very good relationship with the developers of Clackamas Cove. Very, very good relationship. The project, according to your administrator, to me personally, was that this project would have died last fall had we not got in there and got behind it. Brian's been a part of this whole effort. That we have DEQ administrators a part of it, now retired. We have fish and wildlife biologists. One of our members here, Richard Craven's a part of it. He's a fisheries biologist. We have people with expertise from Oregon City, West Lynn, Gladstone that are citizens either working still as consultants, engineers, and others, or retired in that capacity. So what I want to let you know is that we have taken a personal interest in the Cove, but we also have interest in things in Gladstone. There's a major rehabilitation of Meldrum Slough, which was a very historic slough and steamboat access area. And they're doing a whole bunch of things in Gladstone at Meldrum Bar Park to steward that properly. Over in West Lynn, a Parks and Recreation board member, who's a member of this group, Heritage Waters Habitat Task Force, she's advising us on things that are currently of interest in West Lynn, one of which is a lagoon above the falls, which is designated for sale that belong to the mill, a wastewater lagoon. That could be rehabilitated, made into wetlands, and the next question is what could we do from a tourism standpoint. We have the Tourism Development Director, President for Clackamas County in this Heritage Waters Habitat Task Force, Peter Watts. He's an attorney. It's really neat to see this interaction. And the developer was stunned. You want to help me? Us? I said, yes. Brian and I said, we want to help you. So this partnership has come alongside such that with your planning staff's involvement and so forth, a lot more trees are going to be saved in the Cove. When I said 800 trees, there's 800 trees in and around the edges of the Cove. 160 where I'm at. I know where they're at, okay? Because I've gone out and assessed them, Brian and I and others. And large intention originally was to remove a lot of vegetation, almost all vegetation on the banks, but that's not going to happen now, it appears. And the project, they're even talking about, could we create floating wetlands? Well, yes, we could. Could we create more down woody material? Could we create nest sites for ospreys, eagles, etc.? Could we do cavity nest sites for squirrels, things like that? And so the whole dynamic in the Cove is, I think, really neat. The Heritage Habitat Task Force has had an impact, and we produced the first development discovery tour on June 1st, and took people to 8 different sites that these developers have been involved with, and other places like Fairview, where there are gravel pits there of several hundred acres in size that, similar to Clackamas Cove, have been made into wonderful attributes for that community. When the mayor hosted us, and the developer of all these projects hosted us, and it was just amazing. We even heard about the aircraft carrier Ranger that the little community of Fairview is going to bring to their community as a major attraction. So, I mean, it was just a really neat thing. So I wanted you to be aware of this because I hope that you'll hear from them occasionally, and we'll hear from them, and that maybe we can partner from time to time if the need be. If not, there's this other group out there that's trying to work in 3 communities we wanted you to be aware of. So.
Great. Thanks,
Okay.
Peter. Yeah. Pete, it occurred to me, I think one thing that may have been left out of the work plan, didn't the Oregon City Watershed Council want to meet or do a presentation or something with this group?
Well, there should be something.
Yeah, it had been mentioned at a previous meeting or during the
Yeah,
interview
there was
process.
some information on that. There's a lot of groups that we should talk to at some point.
Maybe there's a way to get like one group per monthly meeting, just some kind of
process of figuring out how to do the interaction?
If we can coordinate with Rita Baker, who's their coordinator over there, and see where, because their meetings are over at the college, right?
Environmental Learning Center.
At the Environmental Learning Center. I've got it on my calendar, but I'm not sure what's currently on their radar, but we'll see if we can coordinate them. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to find out what they're up to, and
Yeah. I know that the most recent big item, maybe it was not last year or the year before, but was the getting the assessment done according to the OWEB process, and then having the consultant complete that work, which I have a copy of, and I believe I put it on the website, but if I didn't, remind me. So it's a good resource.
there was actually quite a list in the documents you sent me that, of different agencies and groups that we might want to contact.
Okay, good.
Interface with.
Okay, yeah, and the district is one of them, Soil and Water Conservation. So, I know it's important to have a presentation at each one of these meetings, and if we get outside experts and agencies to come and collaborate with us at each presentation, I think that will be good. Keep us abreast of what's going on around our watershed. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, so is there any other discussion at this point?
I just got a question. Does everybody here have each other's contacts? Phone numbers?
I don't have anything.
I needed to give you a sheet, which I gave everybody else, Andrew, so I'll get you a copy of it right here.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think I have that either. Did you?
Okay, I'll go make a couple copies and hang out afterwards, and I'll get you that.
Good.
Okay.
All right. So you just want to adjourn us, and we'll
I
get
think we're adjourned. If there's no further discussion, and we're all good to go.
All right.
Thanks, guys.